gentlemen, good evening to you.
This is Lowell Thomas in New York.
Beatles emerged off the
And go, my fellow Americans!
I'm Gerald Huntley, your host on...
We have 73 television cameras on Mayday Gerald.
President Nixon is actively...
One small step for man.
Hello, everyone. I'm John Sigenthaler in for Jane Pauley, and this is a special edition of Time and Again. What you see around me is the wreckage of people's lives, people unlucky enough to be in the path of a killer tornado. The twisters that touched down here in central Florida, leaving dozens of people dead, were even more powerful than the hurricane in 1992, Hurricane Andrew. President Clinton came here to Kissimmee, Florida today to see the destruction firsthand and to speak to the people whose lives have been blown apart.
What I want to say today is that all over this country, your fellow Americans are praying for you and pulling for you, and whatever it is within our power to do to help you return to normal lives, we will do.
On this special edition of Time and Again, a look at the phenomenon of tornadoes. We'll see how people have coped with disasters similar to this one and hear the latest on the science of predicting these killer storms. We'll also revisit the dramatic 1996 hit movie Twister starring Helen Hunt. But first, a look at what happened in central Florida the night of February 22nd from NBC's Carrie Sanders.
By first light, it was clear the twisters were the worst in Florida history. One funnel, a quarter-mile wide, cut a path 9 miles long. Mobile homes were hit hardest.
They found people that were right next to us on the turnpike.
Many of those killed here were asleep when the tornadoes touched down. But there was warning.
You certainly would like to seek shelter immediately, and by that...
Then, at 11:50 p.m., South Daytona Beach, the first confirmed tornado kills one person. 11:50, another tornado drops down in Winter Garden. 3 more die. 12:30 a.m., another twister hits Sanford and Altamont Springs, killing 11. 20 minutes later, it's now 10 till 1 in the morning, Campbell City. Another tornado, another 14 are killed. The twisters, so powerful one after another, come as a surprise. Experts say tornadoes this far south in Florida are unusual in the winter. They blame El Niño. These tornadoes came from the very storms that hit California last week, moved through the Gulf of Mexico this weekend, and then into Florida. All told, the twisters took only 2 hours to tear through Florida, taking more lives than Hurricane Andrew did in Florida, the deadliest storm to hit this state in modern history until now.
Winter tornadoes can be especially deadly. Almost exactly 1 year ago, a series of twisters ravaged the South. NBC's Frederica Whitfield filed this survivor story from Arkadelphia, Arkansas.
This is a tornado, a 200-mile-an-hour vacuum, sweeping away everything in its path. On Saturday afternoon, one of these roared down on the tiny towns of southwest Arkansas. Before the day ended, other southern states would be hit. But here, in a part of the country known as Tornado Alley, the destruction was unimaginable.
We're lucky that we have our lives at least.
In Saline County, 2-ton trucks and split-level homes are ripped from their moorings, the debris scattering hundreds, even thousands of feet. And further south, in Arkadelphia, a small community is shattered in a matter of seconds. Incredibly, the day that ended like this began like this, with a blue sky and no hint of the storms to come. 2:25 Saturday afternoon, Arkadelphia resident Kenley Barksdale and her dog Spanky are home alone when weather officials broadcast the first warnings that a twister is headed their way.
This is a News 4 severe weather bulletin.
Just hot off the wire, brand new tornado warning.
Kenley's husband, Mickey, a town paramedic, is at the local hospital when the warning goes out. Around 2:30, he calls home to comfort Kenley, who has had a lifelong fear of tornadoes.
We have teased her so badly. I mean, I remember being in tornado watches and her just flying off the handle saying, "Get in the closet, get in the closet." We're like, just chill out, Kenley, you know, it's nothing's going to happen. How often does a tornado hit somebody?
I think everybody has their own irrational phobia, and this is kind of mine.
Initial reports indicate that the tornado is far from Kenley's home. But like most winter twisters, this one is moving quickly and unpredictably. The couple decides that Kenley should camp out in the bedroom closet until the storm passes.
It was growing and getting stronger and louder. It was like a giant concrete ball the size of a mountain rolling towards me. That's when I started to panic. I knew that was a tornado, and I knew it was coming right for me.
Tornadoes are spawned from highly organized thunderstorms called supercells. When warm, moist air passes under cooler air, differences in wind speed and direction create a tube of spinning winds called a vortex. Rain-cooled downdrafts of wind force the vortex to tilt and stand on its end. As the vortex meets the ground, friction forces the winds to spin tighter, creating a funnel that sweeps up everything in its path. Back in Arkadelphia, a large funnel zeroes in on Kenley's home.
And the next thing I heard was the roof starting to be ripped off. And then it was like an explosion. It was almost as if a bomb had hit. It was like a boom. And the wall behind me fell in on me and pushed my nose down to my feet where I was sitting. And I thought then, I'm going to die right here. I could just die right here in this closet.
Kenley's husband knows nothing of the terror she is going through in the closet. His unit is dispatched to a nearby trailer park. At the scene, nothing has prepared him for what he sees.
We got around the corner and saw it, and it was just total devastation.
Moments later, a call.
They called over the radio and told me that my neighborhood was wiped out. So I just couldn't believe it. I just thought, what if she's gone? What am I going to do? I lost the will to live for just a second.
Kenley's husband faces an incredibly difficult decision. He knows his wife was in the path of a tornado. His home was destroyed, but there are so many victims to treat. He has to stay.
I had to do my job while I was there, so I did what I could.
Arkadelphia paramedic Mickey Barksdale doing his job in 1997 while not knowing the fate of his own home, his own family. The dramatic conclusion of his story when Time and Again continues. Welcome back to Kissimmee, Florida, as we continue to look at the devastation caused by tornadoes past and present. Let's continue now with NBC's Frederica Whitfield and the story of Kenley Barksdale and her husband Mickey, separated by a killer tornado in Arkadelphia, Arkansas in 1997.
My first thought was, I'm trapped here, and no one's going to find me. I'm stuck here, and I'm not going to be able to get out.
This is what is left of Kenley's house. She is pinned beneath the boards and bricks that moments earlier had been her home.
That will to live kind of kicked in, and I decided I was going to do everything I could to get out. I couldn't sit there and think, who's going to save me from this? That wasn't my thoughts.
Close by, Kenley's father emerges from the rubble of his photography store. Again, the path of destruction has been arbitrary and cruel. A trailer flung by 260-mile-per-hour winds has smashed the front of his store.
Everybody was like me, just in a daze, because just moments before there'd been a town, and now it was just flattened.
He follows the path of devastation. It leads right to his daughter's front door.
I started running toward Kenley's house.
He's not the only one concerned. Friends of Kenley's know she was alone in the house, and they race to help her. But when they get there, they're afraid of what they'll find.
The house was so demolished, we didn't know if she was in here, if she would have made it. Didn't really want to find her, but we knew we had to keep looking, so we both kept looking.
Then their hearts skip a beat.
When I first got here, there was a wig laying under one of the walls, and it scared us pretty bad. I had a heart attack. we noticed it was just a wig, and we kept digging through it.
By now, word is out that people have died. What they don't know is that in Arkadelphia alone, 7 have died, 102 injured, and across Arkansas, 25 are dead, and more than 400 injured. They wonder, is Kenley among them?
We saw this picture when we first got here. It was sitting on top of all the debris. It wasn't a good sight.
What they don't know yet is that Kenley had pushed her way through the jagged, splintered beams and crawled to safety. Now she searches desperately for her father, who she fears may be dead.
We ran to each other, and it was the best feeling it just brought such a peace to me that I realized that nothing else mattered. It just didn't matter. Once I saw him, I knew then, okay, we can go on now from here.
I was running, and she was running, and we were both crying. She told me, but the first thing we told each other was how happy we were to see each other and how much we loved each other. And then she told me that the house was gone.
Tonight in Arkadelphia, the town is still reeling. 30 residents remain hospitalized. Reunited hours after the disaster, Kenley and Mickey are among the 1,100 survivors who are homeless, but together and alive.
You've lost your home, most of your material possessions. You have each other.
Yeah, we got it all. I am the richest man I know.
I'm John Sigenthaler in Kissimmee, Florida, and welcome back to our special edition of Time and Again as we look at the awful power of tornadoes, such as the ones that struck right here in central Florida. Tornadoes come and go with frightening speed, and it's not often that they're captured on live TV. There was an unforgettable exception on May 12, 1997 in Miami.
A tornado right in the middle of a major metropolitan area. Because of that, a lot of cameras caught it live. As it touched down on Miami's southwest side early this afternoon, then snaked slowly right across the downtown area. Winds whipping to at least 55 miles an hour, sending people scrambling. An awesome sight caused by the clash of hot, heavy air over Miami, meeting cool wind blowing in off the ocean. It lasted only 4 or 5 minutes and then disappeared as it moved out over Biscayne Bay. But in those 5 minutes, it provided many with the sight and scare of a lifetime.
We were just having lunch, and all of a sudden the wind started picking up, and the wind started picking up, and we just started running to the kitchen. I mean, it was horrendous. Things were flying everywhere.
Fortunately, there were only minor injuries, but there was damage. Trees uprooted over several areas of the city. Car damage, a lot of car damage. Windows smashed, vehicles crumpled. Rooftops damaged as well, skinned back from buildings. Some roofs actually picked up and deposited a half block away. Otherwise, poles and traffic signs were down and a lot of debris left in the streets. The Weather Bureau saw the unstable conditions building, had issued a tornado watch for southern Florida earlier in the day, and was able to provide 7 minutes warning for the Miami area. But even for this weather-hardened region, once battered by Hurricane Andrew, drenched often by sudden tropical squalls, a tornado right in downtown Miami is a phenomenon no one at the Weather Bureau today could recall ever happening.
NBC's Robert Hager knows a thing or two about tornadoes. He filed this report in May of 1996.
Dust on the ground.
Tornadoes.
Okay, funnel.
Winds which can blow even stronger than hurricanes, up to nearly 300 miles an hour, which can cut damage over several states, such as the ones last night in Kentucky, Indiana, and West Virginia. Dr. Joe Golden's been chasing them for decades.
The tornado is the most intensely concentrated atmospheric destructive phenomenon on the planet.
And the U.S. has more than any other country, an average 800 a year, which can strike anytime, anywhere, but are concentrated in Texas, Oklahoma, Kansas, and Missouri, what's called Tornado Alley, as well as a broad area of the Midwest and Southeast, which average at least 1 or more a year. The most dangerous time in the South is spring. In the North, it's summer. 10 years ago, average warning time, if any, was only 2 or 3 minutes. But now with Doppler radar and GOES satellites, that's changing.
Now we are issuing predictive warnings on tornadoes with the average lead time for the National Weather Service of about 5 to 8 minutes.
But scientists aren't certain how tornadoes start. Traditional thinking, as thunderstorms build, they develop strong counterclockwise winds within, which drop down to form the tornadoes, feeding off warm, humid air. But a fascinating new belief is that sometimes the circular winds develop first horizontally and then are pushed by updrafts, turning them into tornadoes. However they start, beware. Decades ago, tornadoes often took hundreds of lives.
But in the last quarter century, no single tornado has caused more than 50 deaths. And now forecasters hope to provide even earlier warnings, saving still more lives. Robert Hager, NBC News, Washington.
That was Bob Hager back in 1996, and we asked him to bring us up to date on the science of predicting tornadoes, especially for Time and Again.
The business of tornado prediction has been terribly difficult through the years. Of all of weather's ferocious phenomenon, the tornadoes are really the most difficult to predict ahead of time. The first stage of warning for the public is called a watch. And it's the Weather Bureau's goal to give a 1-hour watch for tornadoes. And they've been able to do that many times in recent years. But the last stage is what's called the warning. That's the ultimate word to people to seek cover. For tornadoes, the best the government's been able to do is 11 minutes on average warning for a tornado. Now, by contrast, for a flash flood, the government's able to average a 20-minute warning. And for a severe thunderstorm, a 20-minute warning. And in the case of a snowstorm or a hurricane, of course, it's just days of warning. So tornadoes are really the most vexing of all to predict and give that ultimate warning for, and sometimes you get 0 warning time. That's why this research is so important, this business about whether they form by twisting down this way or whether they form by rolling on Earth and then getting twisted up, and then you get your tornado. The more weathermen know about just how those phenomena form, the more they can put that into computers, and the more warning time they hope to be able to give the public.
Thanks, Bob. When we come back, minute by minute, in Gerald, Texas, devastated by a killer tornado in 1997. If anyone can understand what the people of Kissimmee, Florida are going through, it's the people of Gerald, Texas, a small community devastated by a monster tornado on May 27, 1997. Much of Gerald, Texas was obliterated. 27 of its people were killed. Just days after the disaster struck, NBC's Rob Stafford filed this minute-by-minute report.
It's total, complete devastation. It looks like a war zone.
For some, there was no time to run and no place to hide.
I've seen burn victims and gunshot victims, but I've never seen anybody spread out 10 yards before.
By the time the battle was over, 62 homes were gone. The dead were still being counted, and the living were counting their blessings. Here on Tornado Alley in Texas, people who didn't fear tornadoes before will never make that mistake again. If Mother Nature had been planning this attack, she gave little warning to the people of Central Texas.
It was beautiful.
Noon on Tuesday. Billy Williams and his son Danny are at home in Gerald, a town so small the locals say there are more livestock than people. Population 664, unaware of the danger looming over the northern horizon.
An hour before it all started, I was laying in the sun getting sunburned.
But 58 miles to the north, near Waco, conditions are becoming a concern to forecasters at the National Weather Service. A cool front is moving in and mixing with the warm, moist air hovering over central Texas. It's a dangerous combination.
Persons in Hewitt, Robinson, and Lorena, take cover. This is a big tornado. It's a large tornado.
1:24 p.m. The first tornado is sighted south of Waco. Live television coverage begins immediately. A tornado warning takes effect 48 miles north of Gerald.
There's a tornado right there on the ground, and it's moving on the ground right outside the station here.
The warning is just in time for a family in the town of Moody. They race out the door at 2 o'clock, only minutes before a tornado tears their house apart. The storm is heading south and is 8 miles closer to Gerald.
Look at the debris circling around this tornado. Look at it. Man, it's a big one.
But in Gerald, no one seems worried yet. They're about to find out funnel clouds are in the next county. 3:20 p.m. A violent storm is forming just 26 miles away over the town of Temple. It begins moving south towards Gerald. Billy Williams hears the warnings and something else. It is 3:45.
A sound I've never heard before. This evil howling, it's a real scary sound.
He and his son head for the most secure room of the house.
I started off in the bathtub, but when I landed, I didn't see a bathtub.
Down the road, Virginia Davidson is mowing her lawn. She has just enough time to get inside.
Went inside, I got a blanket and got in the bathtub and put it over me. I guess I was just waiting to die.
On the edge of town, Constable Gary Griffin is just pulling into the local truck stop as the tornado is ripping into Gerald.
They were all scared. I was scared.
Griffin leads a group of 60 panicked people up this embankment to crouch under an overpass. He sees the tornado sprouting a series of funnel clouds.
Big one's over there, that one, there was another one over there, there was another one over there.
I was hearing this sound. It was like a bear growling.
Back at the Williams house, as father and son hear the twister pass, they rush down the road to help their neighbors. Even Billy, a 13-year veteran of Coast Guard rescues, can't believe what they find.
It was the most devastating thing I've ever seen. In all my years in search and rescue, I've never seen anything as devastating as that.
The monster tornado, now half a mile wide, plows a mile-long furrow through a neighborhood of about 3 dozen homes, some of them brick, flattening the subdivision in only minutes.
I expected to find something, and we didn't find anything, except for just wreckage and bodies.
The Williams find a mother and daughter buried in mud, but alive. Constable Griffin is also here, but the family he wants to rescue is beyond help.
She was a mom holding on to her, so they were just holding each other. And they died that way.
The houses here are wiped off their foundations. Asphalt ripped right out of the road.
From the road off, it was just dirt and mud and wreckage.
Danny Williams and his father hope to rescue more people from the rubble, but they do not.
There was a younger girl, couldn't have been but 6 or 7 years old, and she was twisted in directions that she shouldn't have been.
Was there anything you could do for these people?
I didn't even bother to take any pulses because they were gone. I mean, just obviously, there was nothing anyone could do for them.
The winds here top 260 miles per hour, almost double the speed of a jet at takeoff. An F5 tornado, the most powerful type, like the monster created for the movie Twister.
Cow.
But the Twister in Texas was no Hollywood special effect. The animals flying through the air here were real. The winds strong enough to rip the hides from their bodies and flesh from bone. At 4 p.m., the storm line is about to make its next stop. Cedar Park is 20 miles down the road in the suburbs of the state capital. Yet another tornado. This one as wide as a football field, guts a shopping center and the Buttercup subdivision. All this in less than 8 minutes. Yet it pales in comparison to what Gerald has suffered.
As of approximately 40 minutes ago, I left the location, the scene, and there have been 30 confirmed dead.
By 5:30, 4 hours after the first funnel cloud appeared, the worst is now over. In Gerald, Sheriff Ed Richards briefs the press and the families.
There's so much debris, but we'll be searching all night long, and then we'll continue again in the morning.
Now the vigil and the questions begin. Was there enough time for the missing to take shelter? Was there any shelter for them to take? And where are they now?
I saw my neighbors right next to me outside looking at it. And we could all see it coming. And then I went inside and I never saw them again.
The search for survivors goes into the night. But by Wednesday morning, the death toll is dropping.
We are getting unconfirmed reports that people we thought were missing are in fact safe, but we do not have any record of it.
A list of survivors is posted at the church, but the name of Gerald Gower's 11-year-old son, Brian, is not on it.
I hope he's still alive, and I hope that Mac's wife is still alive, too.
A makeshift morgue is set up at the fire department, but families are not allowed inside.
I just gave him a picture of my little boy, and they're going to match the picture I have of my little boy and the mugshots they take.
9 o'clock Wednesday night. Authorities are behind closed doors trying to match those photographs of the missing with the remains they recovered. For many families, the answers do not come from listening to the officials, but from looking at these pictures. In their hearts, they hope for a miracle, but their minds realize no one could survive this. Down in this valley, that is all that's left of Gerald's Double Creek Estates. When the tornado jumped into the valley, there was no way out. Even though the town was hit by a twister back in 1989, most of the houses here have no basements and no shelters, because just underneath the soil is a layer of limestone, which is difficult and expensive to break through. Up the hill, the few people who did have shelters, some of them built 50 years ago, were packing them with friends and neighbors when the tornado hit.
2 times in 8 years is too many for me. You know, and if we're going to stay here, we're going to have a shelter.
As Billy Williams talks about building a shelter, many of his neighbors think about rebuilding their lives. On Thursday morning, people anxious to survey the damage find out that Double Creek is still closed off.
Everything is laying on the road and out in the fields, you know, and we can't go in there and get it.
Finally at noon, homeowners are allowed back in for the first time, but only because authorities are convinced all the bodies have now been found.
The 27 bodies that we've located and the 27 names that we have of people who are unaccounted for will match up eventually.
This morning, the first bodies of the dead are released to the families. Still scattered through town is debris. And if they needed a further reminder of the lives that were lost, tonight, another tornado has touched down near Waco.
It's really made me want to settle down and get my life in order. I can't stand thinking that I could have been one of those people.
That was May 1997. Gerald, Texas is still struggling to recover. When we come back, a tale of two sisters facing down disaster. Getting through a natural disaster like the one that struck here in Central Florida can be a terrible ordeal. Worse than the fear for one's own safety, the concern for the loved ones, often not knowing for hours whether they survived. Well, NBC's Dawn Fratangelo filed this survivor's story in 1996 from Oakfield, Wisconsin.
There was no question in my mind that this was serious.
This thing just kept on going like it had a purpose to wipe out the town.
No one who witnessed it will ever forget the tornado that tore through their community last July. Certainly not Karen Kennan or her sister, Kathy Geelan.
We just happened to look out and there was a tornado. I'm screaming. I'm running to the house to try to get the kids to the basement.
That's when Kathy went back outside with her video camera to document what would later be classified as the most powerful type of tornado. And it was coming right at them.
It's coming straight for us!
When you were looking through that viewfinder of that camera, what were you thinking?
Just unbelievable. You could see these big pieces, you know, I'm assuming they were cars. And there were probably houses flying in there. They were just huge, just whirling and whirling. And you can hear that whirl going round and around.
Creating winds of up to 265 miles per hour, the twister was moving menacingly closer when a train happened to pass right between it and Kathy's farm.
Oh, that train! When the train started coming down the track, I was just like, if this tornado doesn't kill us, it's going to pick this train up. It's going to dump it on us.
Luckily, the train rolled by just in time, but the tornado continued to hurl itself towards the farm. That's when Kathy decided to join her family, huddled in the basement, and hope for the best.
You were just waiting for the initial impact, you know, and it just never came. You know, but it had to go someplace, and you're just wondering, where did it go?
Kathy and her family were safe, but not everyone was so fortunate.
The tornado took just 10 minutes to pass through this tiny town of Oakfield, leaving behind a path of devastation. Property damages are estimated at nearly $40 million. Almost 200 homes were destroyed or damaged. This tornado is the worst natural disaster this county has ever seen.
Even after it passed, there was no reprieve for Kathy because she feared her sister may have been caught in the tornado's unforgiving path.
When you heard that Oakfield had been hit hard, were you fearing the worst for your sister?
Oh, yes. I couldn't get any place, you know, and there was no way of, the phones were dead. The cellular phones were just jammed, you know, and there was no place for me to call.
So Kathy was left to wonder and worry.
I was on the porch at that point. I said, we have to go. Let's get in the basement. So my boys and I ran through the house.
But Karen's husband didn't join them. He was curious and stayed outside with a neighbor, Kelly Schmitz, to watch a force neither had seen before.
All of a sudden I seen a cornstalk come out of the top of this cloud. I said, that's a tornado right there. It's touched down, get in your basement.
Kelly had had enough. He quickly ran to his basement to shelter his two young children. But Karen's husband was still taking one last look.
And it's like, where is he? And it's like I was paralyzed. It's like I'm screaming for him, and I couldn't do anything. And then I heard him at the back of the house saying, there goes our utility shed. And then there goes the garage, and I'm screaming, get down here. And he just ran down, and the windows smashed in. All I could think to myself was, this is it. We're not coming out of this.
You thought you were going to die?
Yeah, I did. I thought we were all gone.
Next door, the twister was taking its toll.
It really started to get windy, and then the window broke, and then Next thing you know, the house is gone. But it lifted up whole, and I seen the whole thing take off. And at that time, I just covered up the kids the best I could and held on.
When it was finally over, Karen and her husband Joe emerged from the shelter of their basement and saw their neighbor's house where it wasn't supposed to be.
We hollered over to our neighbor, Kelly. Kelly, are you all right? And he gave us the thumbs up, and I couldn't believe it because his foundation is here and his house is over there. And looks like something out of the Wizard of Oz, looking for the witch to be underneath it.
When you came out of the basement, did you know where your house was?
I didn't realize where my house was until I got out on the street, and I seen the house on the neighbor's foundation. At first, I just assumed that it was their house. And then it dawned on me that my house was white and they had a yellow house, and then that was my house, you know, but it was just a crumpled up mess.
After several hours of waiting and agonizing, Kathy finally knew her sister was not hurt. But Karen was shattered when she realized the severe damage to her home.
I looked at my home and I just, started crying, and it was like, this is not our home. There was much more damage than we had seen when we left.
And you didn't recognize it at first because you were still in shock.
Mm-mm.
Karen's home, almost destroyed, had to be leveled.
Is it hard to come back?
Yes and no. Sometimes you come in and it's just like, okay, this is what used to be Oakfield, and then other times it's just like you look at it and you think of that total destruction from the first time, when it first happened, and then it's just like it's just not possible. There's nothing here. This used to be homes and friends and neighbors, and it's all gone now.
Even so, Karen Gielen counts her blessings.
When you look at the destruction, I guess I can't imagine that no one was killed. I mean, it's just massive destruction. It was like a war zone. It's like, how can anyone come out of this alive? Obviously, God was watching over us. We were very lucky.
For most of us, the earliest memory of a tornado is probably the famous twister that whisked Dorothy and Toto away from Kansas in The Wizard of Oz. Dorothy's frightening encounter with a tornado turned into a grand adventure with a happy ending. But as we've seen on this special edition of Time and Again, the reality of tornadoes is far different. They have the power, as few things do, to destroy and to change forever the lives they touch. Just ask the people here in Kissimmee, Florida. That is Time and Again, our special edition of Time and Again tonight. Thanks for joining us. I'm John Sigenthaler, in for Jane Pauley. Have a good night.